A woman is alone in a desert. She is not a prophet. She is not a queen. She is a slave, Egyptian, young, pregnant, and running from the only household she has ever known. She has been walking for days through the wilderness of Shur, which is a stretch of rock and sand between Egypt and Canaan that is, by every human measure, the worst possible place to be. She has no water left. She has no plan. She is sitting beside a spring that she found by accident, and she does not know what happens next. Her name is Hagar, and then a voice speaks. It calls her by name, not by title, not by household, not by the name of the mistress she fled, by her name. End quote. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? End quote. She answers, and what follows is a conversation that changes her life, predicts the birth of her son, and names a nation that does not yet exist. But here is what makes this moment unlike almost anything else in the ancient world. When the encounter is over, Hagar does not say, end quote, I have seen an angel, end quote. She does not say, end quote, a messenger of heaven visited me, end quote. She looks at the face of the being who just spoke to her, the one the text calls the angel of the Lord, and she asks a question that no one has fully answered in 4,000 years. She says, have I really seen God? And then, because she is bolder than most theologians, she answers her own question. She gives the being a name, not a title, a name. She calls him El Roi, the God who sees, not the angel who sees, the God who sees. Here in Apos, that's what most people miss. That is not a small distinction. In the ancient world, you do not name a being above yourself. You do not give a title to a created messenger that belongs only to the one who sent him. Hagar has just looked at the angel of the Lord, and she has seen something in that face that told her, with complete certainty, that she was not talking to a representative. She was talking to the one who sent him, or she was talking to a being who was both at once. That question, the one Hagar asked beside the spring of water in the wilderness of Shur, is one of the strangest, most important, and most overlooked questions in all of Scripture. Who is the angel of the Lord? This is not a story about angels in general. This is not a systematic theology lecture on celestial hierarchies. This is not a survey of every time a messenger appears in the Bible. This is a story about one specific figure, one who appears at every crisis in Israel and Apos' history, who does things no created angel is ever permitted to do, who accepts worship that belongs to God alone, who speaks as God in the first person, who refuses to give his name, and who, the moment Jesus of Nazareth is born in a stable in Bethlehem, disappears completely, without explanation, never to appear again in that form. And the silence after his disappearance is the loudest evidence of all. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you are going to understand not just who he was, but why his absence is the most powerful argument for the identity of Jesus that the Old Testament never knew it was making. Let Apos' start on a mountain. The year is somewhere around 1800 years before Christ. A man named Abraham, 100 years old, father of exactly one son by the woman he loves, is walking up the side of a hill called Moriah. He is carrying fire and a knife. His son is walking beside him, carrying the wood for the altar they are about to build. The boy in Apos' name is Isaac. He is a teenager. He does not yet know that he is the offering. You know this story, but I want you to feel what Abraham felt at that specific moment, the moment when Isaac turned to him and said, and quote, Father, I see the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? End quote. Abraham says, end quote, God will provide the lamb, my son, end quote. He is not being prophetic. He is buying time. He has no idea what God is about to do. He has received a command from God, a command he cannot understand, a command that seems to contradict every promise God has ever made him, and he has chosen to obey it anyway. That is what makes Abraham Abraham. Not that he never doubted, but that he moved his feet in the direction of obedience even when his mind was full of questions. They build the altar. Abraham binds his son. He raises the knife. And then the voice comes. End quote. Abraham, Abraham, end quote. The text says the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven. And what follows is one of the strangest authority claims in the Hebrew Bible. The angel does not say, end quote, God says to stop, end quote. He does not say, end quote, I bring you a message from the Lord, end quote. He says, with no mediation, no buffer, no reference to a higher authority. End quote. Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. End quote. From me. Not end quote. From God. End quote. Not end quote. From the Lord. End quote. From me. And then, a few verses later, the angel speaks again. And this time he makes a vow. He says, end quote, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord. End quote. That phrase, by myself I have sworn, is one of the most loaded phrases in all of Hebrew theology. You know who swears by themselves in the Hebrew Bible? God. Only God. Because there is no higher authority to swear by. When God wants to make an unbreakable vow, he stakes his own existence on it. He swears by himself. The angel of the Lord, standing in the air above Mount Moriah, is swearing by himself. No created angel does that. No seraph, no cherub, no mighty messenger in the heavenly court takes an oath by their own existence. They are creatures. They have no authority to do so. Only the being who is the standard of truth can swear by that standard. Abraham builds an altar. He names the place Yahweh Yir, the Lord will provide. And he comes down the mountain with his son alive, having just heard the angel of the Lord speak to him in the first-person voice of God. Now let and Apos go 300 years later to a town called Ophrah in the territory of Manasseh. The Midianites have been raiding Israel for 7 years. Every harvest season, they come across the border like locusts, taking grain, taking livestock, taking everything. The Israelites have taken to hiding their food in caves and threshing it in secret, in places too small for raiders to notice. A man named Gideon is in one of those places right now. He is threshing wheat in a winepress, which is underground, dim, cramped, the worst possible place to thresh grain, but the safest possible place to hide from your enemies. He is not a soldier. He is not a judge. He is not a leader of any kind. He is a frightened young man from the weakest clan in the weakest tribe of Israel, doing what frightened people do, hiding in small spaces and hoping the danger will pass. The angel of the Lord appears, and what he says next is so startling that Gideon and Apos' response is basically, you have got to be joking. The angel says, end quote, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior, end quote. Gideon says, end quote, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? End quote. He is not wrong. It is a fair question. And here is what is remarkable. The angel of the Lord does not correct Gideon and Apos' theology. He does not explain the suffering. He does not offer a comfort that resolves the tension. He says something stranger and more powerful than any of those things. He says, end quote, go in this strength of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do I not send you? End quote. Do I not send you? Again, the angel speaks as the authority, not the representative of an authority. He is not relaying a message. He is issuing a commission. Gideon, unconvinced, asks for a sign. He brings out a young goat, unleavened bread, and broth, a meal. He lays it before the angel as an offering. And this is where it gets remarkable. The angel of the Lord touches the offering with the tip of his staff. Fire erupts from the rock and consumes it entirely. The meat, the bread, the broth. And then he vanishes. Gideon and Apos' response? He says, end quote, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face, end quote. And then, exactly like Hagar, centuries earlier, he concludes that he is about to die. Because in the Hebrew mind, no human being can see the face of God and live. That is not a rule about angels. That is a rule about God. There is one more encounter I want you to see before we go deeper. A woman in the hill country of Zorah. She is married. She has no children, and she has been told she will never have children. Her husband and Apos' name is Manoah. Her name the text does not give us. She is simply, end quote, Manoah and Apos' wife, end quote. The angel of the Lord appears to her first. He tells her she will conceive a son. He gives her specific instructions. He tells her the boy will be a Nazirite from birth, set apart for God, never to cut his hair, dedicated before he is born to a purpose greater than anything his parents can understand. She runs to tell her husband. Manoah prays and asks God to send the man back. The angel of the Lord comes back. Manoah, still apparently thinking he is talking to a wise man or a prophet, asks him his name. The angel refuses. He says, end quote, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" End quote. That word, wonderful, in Hebrew, Pele, it is not a description of his personality. It is a title. In the book of Isaiah, written centuries after this encounter, the prophet Isaiah describes the child who will be born, the Messiah, and lists his names: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The first name in that list is the same word the angel uses here. Pele, wonderful, incomprehensible, a name that belongs to God alone. Manoah and his wife offer a burnt sacrifice on a rock. The angel of the Lord steps into the flame of the altar and ascends in the fire, going up with the smoke, vanishing into heaven. Manoah falls on his face. He says to his wife, end quote, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." End quote. Not an angel, God. Do you see the pattern? Every single time the angel of the Lord appears in the Old Testament, the people who encounter him do not leave the encounter saying they met a messenger. They leave saying they saw God. Hagar names him El Roi, the God who sees. Gideon says he has seen the angel of the Lord face to face and fears for his life. Manoah says they have seen God. Abraham hears him swear by himself. This is not the behavior of a created angel. Ordinary angels in Scripture refuse worship. When the Apostle John falls at the feet of an angel in the book of Revelation, the angel pulls him back up and says, end quote, "Don and Apos, do that. I am a fellow servant. Worship God." End quote. That is the correct behavior of a holy angel. The angel of the Lord never does that. He receives the offerings. He accepts the worship. He speaks as God. He acts as God. If this is landing differently for you than it ever has before, I want you to subscribe right now, because we are not even halfway through. The deepest part of this mystery is still ahead, the part where he vanishes, and why that changes everything. Let Apos go to a burning bush. A man named Moses is 80 years old, living in the desert of Midian, tending sheep for his father-in-law. He has spent 40 years in this desert after fleeing Egypt, where he was raised as a prince in Pharaoh and Apos' household. He is, by his own account, nobody anymore. He was somebody once, in a palace once, with a destiny once. And now he is an old shepherd in a borrowed land, watching borrowed sheep, with no reason to think the second half of his life will be any different from the last 20 years of the first. He sees a bush that is on fire. He has seen desert fires. This one does not go out. He walks toward it. And here is what I want you to pay close attention to. Exodus chapter 3, verse 2, end quote. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, end quote. The angel of the Lord. That is how the text introduces the encounter. Now verse 4, 2 sentences later, end quote. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, end quote. God called. Same bush, same voice, same encounter. The text shifts without explanation from end quote, angel of the Lord end quote, to end quote, God end quote, as if they are the same being. Because the author of Exodus believes they are the same being. Pay attention to this. The voice from the burning bush says to Moses, end quote, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, end quote. That is a first-person identity claim. I am the God of Abraham. Not, end quote. God sent me to tell you he is the God of Abraham, end quote. Not, end quote. I carry a message from the one who was present at the covenant, end quote. I am. The same construction Jesus will use in the Gospel of John, most explosively when the Pharisees challenge his authority and he says, end quote, before Abraham was, I am, end quote. The crowd picks up stones, because they know exactly what that phrase means. Now skip forward 900 years, to a night vision given to a prophet named Zechariah. Zechariah sees a courtroom. It is the divine court, the throne room of heaven. Standing in the center of this court is a man named Joshua, not the Joshua who crossed the Jordan River. This is the high priest of Israel after the Babylonian exile, a man who has come back from Babylon to help rebuild the destroyed temple in Jerusalem. He is wearing filthy clothes. The text specifies this. Filthy garments in the presence of the divine court. On one side of Joshua stands Satan, the accuser, making his case. On the other side stands the angel of the Lord. Here is what the angel does. He rebukes Satan. He says, end quote, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan." End quote. And then he turns to Joshua, and he says, end quote, "Behold, I have taken your iniquity away from you, and I will clothe you with pure vestments." End quote. I have taken your iniquity away from you. No created angel does that. The forgiveness of sin is not in the gift set of heaven and Apos' messengers. They can announce forgiveness. They can carry the declaration of forgiveness, but they cannot originate it. Only the one whose law was broken can forgive the breaking of it. The angel of the Lord, standing in the divine court, is pronouncing the forgiveness of a high priest and Apos' sin on his own authority. And if that were not enough, there is one more text. The last prophet of the Old Testament, a man named Malachi, writing approximately 430 years before the birth of Jesus. His book ends with a promise, and the promise uses a phrase that should stop you cold. He writes, end quote, "Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight." End quote. The messenger of the covenant, the one who has been appearing since Genesis, the angel of the Lord, the God who sees, the one who swears by himself, the one whose name is wonderful. And Malachi is saying, he is coming, not as a flame, not as a voice in a burning bush, not as a figure in a dream. He is coming to his temple, in person, as the covenant itself, made visible. 400 years after Malachi writes that sentence, a man walks into the temple in Jerusalem and overturns the money changers and Apos' tables and says, end quote, "This is my father and Apos' house." End quote. Now here is the question that ties everything together. After the incarnation, after Jesus is born in Bethlehem, after he is baptized in the Jordan, after he dies and rises and ascends into heaven, what happens to the angel of the Lord? He is gone, not reduced, not renamed, not reassigned, gone. In the New Testament, every single reference to an end quote, angel of the Lord end quote, is referring to an ordinary created angel. Gabriel appears to Mary. An angel of the Lord appears to the shepherds. An angel of the Lord releases Peter from prison. An angel of the Lord strikes down Herod for accepting worship that belongs to God. None of these angels behave like the angel of the Lord from the Old Testament. They are messengers. They deliver news. They perform tasks. They correct people who worship them. They are extraordinary. But they are not the being who swore by himself above Mount Moriah. They are not the voice from the burning bush. They are not the figure who pronounced forgiveness in the divine court. The angel of the Lord, the specific, named, divine presence who appeared at every turning point in Israel and Apos' 4,000-year history, makes his last Old Testament appearance, and then simply does not appear again. Why? In the year AD 150, in the city of Rome, a philosopher named Justin Martyr sat down with a Jewish scholar named Trypho and had a conversation that was later written down and has been preserved for nearly 2,000 years. Justin was a Christian convert. Trypho was a Jew. They disagreed about almost everything. But Justin made an argument that Trypho could not fully dismiss, an argument from the Hebrew scriptures themselves. Justin said, essentially, this, your own texts describe a being who is with God and yet is God, who appears in visible form while God remains invisible, who carries the divine name and yet can be seen by human eyes. The prophets called him the angel of the Lord. We call him Jesus. And the reason he stopped appearing in that form is the same reason a shadow disappears when the sun comes out. Not because the light is gone, because the light has arrived. The shadow is not the sun, but the shadow is cast by the sun. And when you are standing in the presence of the sun itself, you do not need its shadow anymore. Here is what Hagar experienced in the wilderness of Shur, that terrified, abandoned, pregnant woman beside a desert spring. She saw a face. She heard her name. She was told she was not forgotten. She asked the most honest question anyone has ever asked. Have I really seen God? And she walked away calling him El Roi, the God who sees. Her question was not answered in the wilderness. It was not answered in the burning bush. It was not answered in the winepress at Ophrah, or on the mountain above Moriah, or in the divine court of Zechariah and Apos' vision. Her question was answered in a stable in Bethlehem, when the being who had been appearing at the edge of human vision for 4,000 years stopped appearing at the edge and arrived in the middle. When the voice that refused to give a name in Judges chapter 13 accepted a name, Jesus, Yeshua, the Lord saves, and let a teenage girl from Nazareth hold him, wrapped in cloth, eyes blinking in lamplight. He did not stop showing up. He stopped showing up as a hint. He showed up as the thing himself. This is not a story about an angel. It was never a story about an angel. This is a story about a God who was too present to stay invisible, too personal to stay abstract, too in love with the people he had made to keep meeting them at a distance. The Old Testament appearances of the angel of the Lord are not just interesting theology. They are a 40-century-long trail of evidence. Every burning bush, every voice above a mountain, every figure ascending in fire, all of it was a preview. All of it was a promise. All of it was the same face, showing up at the worst moments of the worst people and Apos' worst days, saying the same thing in different languages and in different centuries. I see you. I know your name. I am not far away. And then he stopped being far away altogether. So here's what I want you to walk away with. 3 things. First, the angel of the Lord is not a category. He is a person. The same person, appearing from Genesis to Malachi, always at a crisis, always doing what only God can do, always leaving the people who encountered him convinced they had seen God and not merely his messenger. Theologians call these appearances Christophanies, appearances of Christ before the incarnation. And the evidence for that conclusion is not a single verse. It is the entire sweep of the Old Testament, building the same portrait over and over, until the portrait gets up and walks into the story in the first chapter of Matthew. Second, every single one of those appearances was a promise about you. Not a promise to ancient Israelites in long-ago deserts. Not a theological footnote for seminary students. A promise to every person who has ever sat in a wilderness moment, broken, alone, out of water, out of options, and wondered if anyone up there actually knows their name. He showed up for Hagar. He showed up for Abraham. He showed up for a frightened wheat thresher hiding underground and called him a mighty warrior. He has been showing up for people who do not deserve it, in moments they did not plan for, with words they were not ready to hear. That is not history. That is character. And character does not change. Third, and this is the one I want you to carry with you. He did not vanish because he stopped caring. He did not disappear because the theophanies were a phase and God moved on to other methods. He did not stop showing up because you are less important than Abraham or Gideon or Hagar. He disappeared because the method changed. Fire and voice and burning bush were always a temporary solution to a permanent problem. How does an infinite God draw close to a finite, frightened human being without destroying them? The angel of the Lord was that solution. For 4,000 years, God finding ways to be present in forms human eyes could survive. And then he stopped surviving them for us and let them survive for him. He came in a body. He felt what you feel. He bled what you bleed. He died what you die. And he came back, not as a voice from heaven, not as a figure in a flame, but as the first human being in all of history to walk out of death alive and stay that way. The angel of the Lord did not vanish. He became someone you can know, not at a burning distance. Up close. Which of these appearances hit you the hardest? Hagar in the wilderness, Abraham on the mountain, or Gideon in the winepress? Tell me in the comments below, because I read them, and I think you will find you are not alone in what this story is doing to you. If this opens something up for you, subscribe. There is so much more where this came from. Every week, we go back into the stories most people have heard but never fully seen, and we look until something looks back. The God who sees is still seeing.